Do you ever find that your legal writing habits sneak into your marketing work or vice versa?
I did, especially at the beginning. It was probably way too legal and not enough like content focused. That was something I really had to learn how to pivot my writing. But you know what's so funny, Rachel, is learning that through the past, 10, however many years. I now, when I write for LinkedIn or I write for a blog for my law firm, I use my content drafting lessons to write those articles.
Hey everyone, I'm Rachel Senegal. Welcome to our interview series, Behind the Byline, where we get a glimpse behind the curtain at the fantastic writers who contribute to our team. Joining me today is Jenny Kiesewetter. Let's kick things off. Hi, Jenny.
Hey, Rachel, how are you? Good to see
Good.
you.
Thanks for joining us. I'm going to start things off and just ask what got you into the world of content marketing?
Well, it's kind of funny. I've been a writer, I guess you can say, for most of my life, not necessarily a professional writer, but I was a journalism major in college with an English minor. I went to law school. I became an attorney. So not only do I do legal writing, but I do articles and whatnot. And I want to say, I guess maybe 10 or 12 years ago, a friend of mine reached out and said, hey, this large payroll HR client would like you to write for them. And I was like, oh, that's great. It's more visibility. And then they paid me. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. And so I kind of trickled into it a little bit over the years. And then really around 2015, 16, 17, and then especially post COVID, I kind of dove in and I'm just consistently writing for various clients now.
Oh, that's amazing. So it kind of just started as, like a one-off for a client and then kind of expanded from there as you noticed like there was an actual need for it. And
Yeah. I didn't know. And I was very, very, very green. So I made a lot of, I wasn't sure how the whole industry works. So just over the last several years, especially since about 2018 forward, I just really dug in and was so grateful to just learn from people and really learn about how the content marketing, content development industry works. And it's really a fun industry.
yeah. And I know you mentioned that because of your law background, you do a lot of law writing, but other than that, is that the specific industry that you are passionate for, or do you have like another industry that you really enjoy writing for
Yeah.
outside of law?
My practice area has focused around human resources and employee benefits and compliance. So I do other types of writing, for other law firms and whatnot, but I really like to focus on HR writing, compliance, employee benefits, that sort of thing, because that's really kind of my niche. And I think it's also a huge industry. So there's a big need for that.
Yeah. Well, what tools and techniques do you use to conduct the research and gather insights about the topic that you're writing about?
That's such a great question. And I think because I do it on a day-to-day basis as an attorney, I already subscribe to numerous industry newsletters and just other news sources. So I kind of know what's happening. Also, over the years, which is different from my legal writing, I've become very familiar with a lot of the HR annual reports that like big companies like McKinsey and Aon and whatnot put out. So I'm very familiar with tracking those statistics over the years. LinkedIn is another big one that does a lot of HR statistics. And so I always go back to those kind of as my tried and true for really solid statistics and trends. And then I'm in this world 24/7, it seems. So I know a lot of the resources. The trick is always, I think, not as much the research, but learning the client, learning their voice, and learning the messaging that they want to get across, like who is their audience.
Yeah. So would you say that using kind of like the social media, like the LinkedIn, is how you stay like, up to date with the latest trends and developments in those industries?
A lot of it, I follow a lot of people in those industries, and that helps me keep in touch with what's going on so I don't miss anything. There's a lot of legislation right now, especially that's being passed in this area. And so that really helps me. But then I also go to other industry publications, Benefits Link, Benefits Pro, some like HR professional type magazines, and those are really great resources too.
Is there anything you do to adapt your communication style when working with different clients or industries?
I definitely do. It depends sometimes if they're business to business or business to consumer, in which case they could be business to consumer or they could also be business to employee. So sometimes they're wanting to communicate just to their internal teams. So I think that that's really important to learn who they're trying to target.
Yeah.
One thing I really focus on in my writing is to try to really break down complicated topics to where they're understandable, and I think that plays well across any of the audiences.
Now, I want to switch gears a little bit more about writing about yourself. What draws
Yeah.
you to a specific topic?
I am a nerd. And I really do love my area. It's very detailed. It's very specific. So I do like learning, diving into like the legislation. Obviously, I like the legal part of it, but I like diving into the legislation or to the agency interpretations like Internal Revenue Service or Department of Labor. But then I like taking it basically from Washington, D.C. and determining how does that affect the rest of us? How does that affect us if we're an employer? How does that affect us if we're a vendor selling things to employers? How does that affect us if we're an employee? So that's kind of the part that's a little bit of the magic pixie dust of how do we take it from Capitol Hill to Main Street America.
Well, I just love that you have such a passion for it, and I feel like that's just what makes like the writing fun, regardless of what the topic is. It's just like finding, the passion and the love for, the research and, whatnot. It makes all the difference in your
Absolutely.
writing, especially for, I think, like these type of topics where, might not always seem like so fun or like lighthearted as like a food and
No.
travel or whatnot, but
Right.
finding that, that niche in there and really like enjoying, I think that probably resonates to so many others, and just being able to bring that out in your writing, that you can tell like, oh, she knows what she's talking about and she
Mm-hmm.
loves what she's talking about.
Yeah, it's definitely not as fun as like exploring the best wineries on the West Coast. Um, but I think it's really a needed topic. I think sometimes depending on the specific topic, it can be overwhelming or confusing, and we all deal with it. Employees, employers, even with freelancers now, we in the gig industry, we're all dealing with it. The other thing I do like about it, because I find that it's intellectually challenging, but it's also challenging to clients, is the fact that it's changing all the time. And so because it's changing all the time, it's important to stay on top of it. And I'm telling you, our employers have a really tough job trying to keep up with all of this. So I feel like at least we're helping them with that.
Yeah. Well, going back to little bit of your legal background, can you share a time when that your legal background helped a client avoid a big content misstep?
I think so. I think just being really absorbed into all of the compliance work, I've been able to make suggestions to clients before, like you may want to focus on this, or it helps me actually refine their message more, probably, as opposed to helping them avoid a misstep. It helps me really focus on helping them refine their message for like compliance. Do you want to have a best practices checklist? Do you want to talk about some mistakes and some corrections, what to do, what not to do? So I think living in that world, and from what I've heard from clients through the years, because you hear all the good and the bad, that it's really been able to help me ask the questions and really ask the right questions, which I think is beneficial for the client.
What's your process like when a content brief touches on law or policy may be changing soon? I know, especially with keeping up with, and all the policy changes.
You definitely have to add in that what I call protective language, or what people will call CYA language, just to let the reader know this is where we are right now. For example, a big bill just passed the U.S. House of Representatives that touches a lot of mostly health benefits for employers, and I've written a couple articles on it, and I've been very careful to specifically say, now this is not yet law. This is not, we are still in the process. These are the next steps. And then typically I'll help the client just remind their reader, especially if it's an organization, if it's an employer, to continue to try to stay up on it, like read our articles that we give you to help, keep up with where we are when they know that something is law or is not law or it's changing again. So definitely give a little bit of the history, especially if the law has changed. We have several laws that have gone back and forth several times over the past few years, depending on who's in office. So I think kind of giving that context is very important, because especially with people being so busy and reading so quickly, you want to make sure you get that in there so they don't misinterpret your article.
Totally. Do you ever find that your legal writing habits sneak into your marketing work or vice versa?
I did, especially at the beginning. It was probably way too legal and not enough like content focused. So it definitely did at the beginning. That was something I really had to learn how to pivot my writing. But what's so funny, Rachel, is learning that through the past, 10, however many years, I now, when I write for LinkedIn or I write for a blog for my law firm, I use my content drafting lessons to write those articles. But it's been very circular for me. So all the lessons I've learned through content writing now really benefits me in my legal practice too.
Oh, that's awesome that they can kind of intersect like that. Well, final question for you is what your future goals or aspirations as a content writer and strategist look like?
Yeah, I want to just continue doing what I'm doing. I'm still kind of in a really important part of my legal practice, but I find that writing, my content development, my content writing, that is, I guess you can say, kind of one of my hobbies, even though it's work, because it exercises a different part of my brain. I feel like it's more creative sometimes. So I'm just planning to keep doing it. I've got to pay for all those future vacations somehow.
That's amazing, Jenny. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll be back with more interviews with these dynamic writers and industry leaders. To learn more about our amazing content strategists, visit clearvoice.com.